Today on Mysterious Morsels, we're discussing my top 10 picks for horror movies. These are my top 10, obviously. Love horror, always loved horror. It's been my thing since I was a little kid, probably because mom and dad left me alone too much since I was the oops baby, and they pretty much used the TV as a babysitter, and in the 80s, that was normal. And I watched way too many things that I shouldn't have at too young of an age. Plus, I grew up at like age 18 because that's what everybody else was around me. So, being the highly mature child that I was, I just always developed a propensity for horror. And I found a lot of it amusing because it was comedic to me. And if you do see a fine line between some comedy and horror, I'm not surprised because there's a lot of little sight gags and jokes in there that are often woven in. So I just always liked it. Going from number 10 in my top 10, and I would say that it starts out with that comedic kind of thing. So the Friday the 13th series, obviously I think it went on to like Jason Takes Manhattan and Jason versus Freddy, which was kind of ridiculous. But Friday the 13th, all I have in my head is the little like in the background when he was like in the ski mask going after the kids. And it was neat. I mean, it was very fun. The idea that you had a bunch of kids out on the lake and, they're getting slaughtered one by one. And it was more of the pathetic way that they were getting killed. It wasn't even intriguing or interesting. It was just pure slasher fun. And you would like to think it was a ridiculous situation. I mean, of course it could happen, but it was more comedic in the way that they were killed off and in the way that they were, put through whatever tortures they were put through. So kind of neat. And then on the heels of that, number 9 for me is Halloween and Michael Myers, because then you have a different kind of a mask, and at least he was like a sociopath and had legitimate problems, whereas Michael is like always been tortured, whereas Jason kind of had the mommy situation, and it's all psychological. But at the same token, Halloween's been really cool because now I think they're even coming out with like the final one with Jamie Lee Curtis, the original Scream Queen, who I love, and playing that Laurie Strode character from way back. They've done a lot with Halloween over the years, and just the classic babysitter, have you check the children, like kind of a situation, which is also a great movie, but it's kind of a B movie, worth checking out. Honorable mention, but Halloween, definitely a franchise with longevity that I love. 8, Bram Stoker's Dracula. I really like it. It's cool. It is horror again, not horror, not necessarily meaning scary too. So like, yes, I enjoy being scared, but I'm difficult to scare. So I would say, as far as just enjoying the genre of horror for what it is in the purest sense, you got to have a Drac in there, and I love the OG of Dracs. I love the Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's from the original novel. It was done very well. I think the cast was fantastic. Where else can you put Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves in a situation where they have very odd Bill and Ted accents of British descent? Pretty funny, but done really well. Loved it. Epic movie, worth watching. Really speaks to the original Vlad the Impaler, and talking a lot about the initial origin of it, and it is kind of a love story in the end game, and it brings in a lot of the extra components of him turning into mist, or turning into a bat, or turning into a rat, or the idea that he could appear as different things, and he needed the element of his earth to keep him whole and young. So it's neat. It's really got all the elements to it. I liked it a lot. 7, Poltergeist. They're back. Little kid, man, scary, scary, scary. So Poltergeist, and again, I was young, so as a kid, I saw this way too young and shouldn't have, but I was constantly watching TV. So the idea of a snowy white TV screen would scare the living crap out of me when I was a kid, because I just always thought it was Poltergeist right away. It's really interesting, though, the backstory of that genre, that franchise, because that franchise was actually hexed. They had a lot of actors die during, before, and post-production, some of natural causes, some of murder, some of very weird diseases, and some just in an untimely way. They had actual skeletons in the pool scene that were coming out of the ground in practical effects. The cast found out about it as a mistake, and it was actual human remains, and they were disturbed, which is a no-no. Rumor has it they were Native American remains, and if Indian burial grounds, that's a no-no. I mean, do we not? Because we'll talk about Pet Cemetery in a minute. But the actual people they ended up having to go and dig the whole thing up and like fix the pool scene. I don't know if they got cadavers or what from the local school that was checking him out, but there was that character of Native American descent, and he was extremely uncomfortable on set because once they found that out, he's like, you're disturbing like the spirits. It's a bad thing. So they had a lot of problems. Jo Beth Williams talks about how she would go back to her trailer and things would be moved and objects would be gone. And eventually when they stopped shooting, she went home, and for like weeks and weeks, pictures on her walls in her own home that was nowhere near the set would be upside down or fall off the wall, or things would shake, and they had a lot of problems. Craig T. Nelson said he had an ominous feeling the whole time. The little girl that was involved ended up dying. She had a very bizarre disease, and you could see her getting sicker and sicker as they kept doing more and more of the sequels. There was a lot of trouble. There was a lot of practical trouble with that, and I'm surprised it's kind of a hexed franchise. I'm surprised that it got underway. It had a lot to it. It was worse than Hamlet. So often compared to that, actually. Obviously not in content, but in theatrical problems. So Poltergeist. 6, I would say It. The original It. Now, I do like the remake, but I do like the original way better, even though I understand the practical effects were more used in CG is a big thing. Now they put CGI everywhere, but the original It was just, a bunch of friends getting together at that perfect age where you're a little too old to be young and a little too young to be old, and you're put in front of a scary situation. You have to deal with it, and, what do you do? And there's this nemesis. Of course, nobody's going to believe you. So what happens? And it was cool. I never really cared for clowns anyway, so just to have an evil clown to hate on purpose, I'm all in. Remake was pretty close, not exactly, to the specs, and then of course they did the sequel and the remake to the sequel, and it's okay. I think they'll probably keep going with that franchise. I just think as far as apples to apples are concerned, it was neat, but I'm always going to be from the original one, which begs the Stephen King number 5 slot as well, Pet Sematary. I love Stephen King, and Pet Sematary, again, the original one, fantastic. Saw the sequel. Sequel's a little ghetto fabulous. I think that's like the only time you see the kid that appeared in Terminator 2 anywhere else again, I might add. But the original Pet Sematary and Pet Sematary 2, although 2 does not much justice to 1, but the remake's okay, but I would stick with the first one, the original one. Also, obviously, books at first. If you read the books, they're even far scarier because your own imagination takes you on an adventure that you're just never even aware that you're on. You'll never look at joggers the same way, that's for sure. But Pax Cow. But yeah, Pet Sematary is fantastic. Really touches to the core of feeling and emotion and wanting to bring something back that you lost, and yet you can't because it's never going to come back the same way. So really neat because it's touching on that loss and grief, and yet when everybody returns, they're not the same because it's like you crossed over. And of course, again, the Indian burial ground theme there really was an Indian burial ground, and you're not supposed to cross that or go into it, and that's where like the ground was sour, if you will, and created a problem. So I thought that was a great like lore behind everything. I must be in a Stephen King kick. I just noticed that for The Shining. Love The Shining. Again, did a remake, Dr. Sleep. Not bad. Love my Ewan McGregor, but again, that was really, it was not a remake. I shouldn't say it was a remake. That was a sequel that behaved as a sequel, but had a little nod to some backstory prior to the original one. I didn't mind it. I liked the premise behind it. The original was a Stanley Kubrick film. And, Stanley Kubrick and Stephen King had a lot of disagreement about how it was shot and the way it was shot. Stephen King, in my opinion, is just the best when it comes to horror. And everybody says to him all the time, I love watching interviews with him and listening to podcasts with him. And people will say, well, Steve, what are you afraid of? And he'll say, oh, everything. And they're expecting him to say nothing. But he's like, oh, I'm terrified of everything. That's why I write that stuff so well. You would expect him to almost be turned off from anything and removed from like above fear, but he's not. In reality, he's in touch with it so well, and that's why he writes reactions so well. And when Stanley Kubrick went to do the movie, very existential, kind of out there guy, he didn't shoot it in a way that I think was as complimentary to Stephen King's style as he liked. I enjoyed it, but I kind of get what Steve means, but at the same token, Steve, like I know him, we're best friends, but he definitely had a very successful movie, and it just took years later to bring out part 2 of the franchise. But when he turns the corner in the little tricycle in the old hotel and it's the idea that you're in the Overlook and it's out in the middle of nowhere and it's shut down for the season. And those twins appear and they're like, hello, Danny. You know, who doesn't want to jump out of their skin? So now you're actually getting not just horror, but actual fear levels. 3, Nightmare on Elm Street. Gotta love Wes Craven, R.I.P. Wes Craven, also one of the best directors when it came to all things scary. I think that Freddy is fantastic because, you know, again, I'm not a remake fan. Robert Englund will always be my Freddy. That is the place where you can't win. It's entering into a realm that you can't protect yourself. When you're dreaming, when you're asleep, you're vulnerable. It's just the way it is. So you can't necessarily wake yourself up, or God forbid you have like a night terror or you have night paralysis. You know, you're in that dream state and you don't know what's real and what's not. And if you truly have the tiniest little grain of thought of anything that's off or seems weird or bothersome to you, that can play in your mind and splinter any which way and get your imagination going in such a negative outlet that you don't know, even when you wake up. Are you still dreaming? Are you not? Did that happen? Was it real? And of course, you look a little kooky when you start asking people. So Freddy coming to you in your dreams, trying to get to you in your dreams, was a whole other level. I would like to throw an honorable mention in here that I didn't think about. It's actually coming to me now, but it's similar in the idea of getting you when you least expect it, and that's The Ring. Now, The Ring was really from a Japanese movie called Ringu. I can't say I've watched that, and I heard it's like super, super crazy scary, but the one with Naomi Watts, which is fantastic, you know, again, the chick coming through, spoiler alert, the TV to get you, like, come on, you know, who thinks that's actually going to happen? But it became like an impossibility that became reality. So, oh, you're in the TV, you can't get me. Oh, just kidding, crawls through and comes to get you. So just like you thought dreams and sleep were safe, your house, you're tucked in, you know, and if you're watching something, oh, it's on the TV realm, it's in the fictional realm. But no, it creates a 3D entryway and it comes and gets you. So I like that idea of playing on the what seems safe and playing on the psyche. It's not just, you know, slasher and some guy physically in front of you trying to cut you up or get you. You know, it's not a hit by a car thing. It's not a spooky realm. It's just straight up, you know, coming to get you by subterfuge means, you know. 2, now a totally different realm, talking like supernatural, The Conjuring, which is a newer movie by contrast for a lot of the stuff on my list. But The Conjuring, I think, and of course it's gone 10 different directions with, you know, Annabelle the Doll and The Conjuring 2 and, you know, Devil Made Me Do It and all the other movies that have come out of it, and The Nun and everything. And I've watched all of them. I think I'm up to date, minus 1 or 2. I really like the way they did that. I am more terrified by religious means than anything else, me personally. So I love horror, but I will get unnerved, and it takes a lot for me to get unnerved. But when I start to see that religious element in it, and I guess it's just, you know, growing up in Catholic school and having like the awareness that there are, in fact, you know, bishops that can go, you know, take care of spooky things that you don't talk about, or just the loose translation to like Van Helsing in the church and things like that. And, you know, and again, you could argue, I don't know what happened in the Crusades. I wasn't alive for it, but just the idea that there was this religious branch or sect makes you wonder, like, what's going on with the Illuminati? You know, what are the Knights of Columbus doing? They aren't just organizations, you know. But The Conjuring was the first time that you really saw the Warren, Mrs. Warren, like Lorraine Warren was fantastic. And like she was a medium and very religious and did have, you know, some say it's a curse or a gift, who knows, to be able to kind of sense some of this stuff. And once you start crossing into like demons and evil portals and things like that, or even like the stuff that they had in the room that they would lock up. First of all, I would never put that stuff in my house. Let's just be clear. I wouldn't even get a warehouse and rent it and put that stuff in it. I'd light it on fire, burn it after a binding spell, see ya, bye-bye. But the fact that they took elements from each of these cases that they saw and like locked them up, and some of these things even still exist. I mean, I watched an interview not that long ago that Post Malone went on some spooky trek with, I forget the magician, but he went to go find one of the old boxes, and it was it like leaned toward him or did something crazy when he went to actually see it, and they're like, you really shouldn't touch this thing, and he did, and there was like this whole moment, and they locked it back up, and I don't know who he saw or where it was. It was a interview I saw on TV, but he just felt like, oh, this is cool. Let me go check it out. And even he got unnerved and was like, nope, not messing with that. So that whole idea of that room and having all these like signature pieces of evil connected to something, and that they overcome it is great. But there's a lot of margin for error there, and that brings me to the number one, which again, in that religious theme, The Exorcist. Yes, it's dated now, of course, in film quality and character, but poor Linda Blair. I mean, she ended up never really having a career independent of that. I can remember her being a after-school special TV movie where she was a teen alcoholic. Obviously, she's another scream queen. Just always kind of doing spooky stuff, because once she did The Exorcist, people didn't even want to be near her. Like, it was banned by the church. It was a whole big no-no in the 70s. There's lots of wildly horrible things that go on in there. Definitely blasphemous, things that you wouldn't want to ever say, do, or imagine, regarding church articles and iconic things. And they call in the actual priest, for the exorcism. And the fact that, again, that is real and you can have them is kind of the spooky factor for me. So I, unfortunately, was about 3 when I saw this. Way too young. Yes, I know. All right. Don't call the CYS on my parents, but too late for that. But I was, watching flicking channels, and I was little, and it was on, and I was like, what is this? And again, I'm fascinated because I knew it was like a spooky thing from just the way it was shot and the music. But the idea that you could take this kid and she could literally be possessed, and it was this horrible demon situation, and then all the priests, and the fact that they kill the priest and that they overcome the whole thing, and then the priest ends up having to basically give his life for the situation. And it was from a book, from real accounts, and it did go back in church history and was there. So not only can you read the book, but this is like firsthand accounts. So that part troubled me. And I remember thinking as a kid, I got to find out what religion this girl is, because, oh my God, am I safe or not? And that was the thing, like, too. I mean, you could play on this a lot of ways psychologically. She wasn't really religious. They didn't really have too much belief in anything. So then they start grasping at straws and end up calling in the Catholic Church to sort of fix the problem. But and if you play on that side of it, like the priest gives his life, so there's that parallel, obviously, to the crucifixion. But the perversions of all things holy in there are grave and shocking if you're not used to it. So just like, dealing with 3 a.m. and, as a perversion of the crucifixion, or dealing with the fact that, she's vomiting all over the place. And of course it was pea soup or whatever they use, but, and she's levitating and horrible things and cursing and speaking in tongues and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot going on there, but it's really just bad as far as what you would take it to be. So I'm not sure for me just what level of scary it was, but I would say for me at the time it was a 10. I've since obviously rewatched it several times, and when her head turns around, wow. But it still bugs me on some level. But that, to me, like when it's that religious thing, it can be the worst that you can possibly think of, because it could happen, and all you have is your faith to protect you. So I'm very much a believer in that. It's the idea of I grew up with Franciscans, so the idea that God will carry you when you're in a bad way. Footprints in the Sand, love that one. But I think that's you just have no recourse but your faith to get through a situation like that. And what made that? There's a lot of what ifs. What made that girl be the one to get picked? Why did that happen? She was a young innocent kid. Like what? And you could go on to the Exorcism of Emily Rose and 20 other different ones, and Possessed, and all these different movies that have played on that. But the OG there was Exorcist. And of course that went on to be a franchise too. Second one wasn't too great. Third one was pretty good. They since came back around a lot, but the original Linda Blair is the way to go. A little honorable mention I'd like to throw in is the Paranormal Activity series. I did like them. That was practical effect, black and white, old school, like pull the door closed with a string, scary. And that was what I really liked to see. So that was kind of neat. There's just a whole franchise that goes 6 or 7 movies deep that I really enjoyed. And again, just simple stuff, but simple jump scares and things that you would enjoy. If you never watched them, I think you should. So that's my rant on all the movies that I grew up with that I thought coming down to spooky season soon, you would enjoy my top 10 horror picks. And if you haven't watched them, I advise that you do. And if you're not into horror, well, then make sure you got the lights on. And my advice is mute things, because the music is a good clue, and it gets your blood pumping, and it makes your blood pressure go higher, because that's the psychological tactic. So if you watch a horror movie on mute during the day, I guarantee it's not as scary as any other time. If you like this type of content, scare the like button into turning blue and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Thanks for watching.